Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are continuing our conversation on the idea of self. So far, we have covered the free will determinism debate and the mind-body problem. And today, we're turning our attention to artificial intelligence, AI. Our reading was the definition list at the end of Chapter 1, and then the entirety of Chapter 2 of Max Tegmark's Life 3.0. The nice thing about Tegmark is that he's very careful in making sure that he introduces and clearly defines all the terms he's using. And that way, everyone should be on the same page and there's less room for misinterpreting his arguments. In this chapter, Tegmark lays out a great argument in favor of our ability to develop AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, and that would, in all relevant ways, be a conscious artificial system. He lays out the four main ideas as follows. 1. Intelligence is the ability to accomplish complex goals. Some computers can already do this, but they don't qualify to be an AGI because their skill set is extremely narrow. A calculator outdoes humans in calculations, but that's the only thing it can do. On the other hand, humans have a nearly unlimited potential for solving all sorts of complex problems. 2. Memory is the ability to store information until needed and the ability to then retrieve it. The interesting thing about memory is that it is substrate independent, and that means that you can use just about anything in the universe as a memory system. You store your memories in biochemical loops in your brain. The computer does so on a hard drive. The matter, the substrate on which you record, is irrelevant, so the ability to have memory is independent of the matter that's being used, or of the substrate that it is based on. A thing to note here, though, is that your body itself is based on a complex memory system, the DNA. Your DNA holds a full set of blueprints for what you are bodily. Your fingerprints, your height, the shape of your eyes, your eyebrows, etc., all are encoded in your DNA. So when you injure yourself, within limits of repair, your body pulls up the memory stored on what you are from DNA and rebuilds those parts of you that have been damaged or are missing. Your reflexes are also genetic. Your scanning for snake mechanisms are also genetic. Your brain's dedication to fine motor functions are genetic. That means that they are, in essence, memories of earlier humans encoded on the most core level and passed down to you that you might better survive. Point 3. Computation is the change of one memory state to another. Tegmark uses the term transformation. Computations in all systems are, Tegmark argues, carried out by functions. The function here means something like a set kind of process by which thing A becomes thing B. Math is nothing but functions. The reduction to functions is why computation can give us predictable results, because it takes a well-known path and thus arrives at the same conclusion each time. Imagine if your computation of 2 plus 5 was a new exploration of mathematics every time and could produce new and strange results. Computation is also substrate independent because the kinds of functions that are used are actually very basic and they are found in everything. And so it doesn't matter what is doing the computation. And as Tegmark shows us in a series of diagrams, you can take the most basic function, AND or NAND gates, and do everything else with it. 4, and finally, learning is the self-rearranging of matter aimed at self-improvement. Now that one sounds rather clinical, but it holds up rather well. Matter rearranging itself means that there is a purpose behind the activity. It is not merely reacting to environment forces and being rearranged. Second, that same purpose is part of the idea of self-improvement. That is the goal. So we have a goal, even if it's open-ended, an intention to achieve that goal, and then an effort at altering oneself in order to actualize that intention and reach that goal. Now, think about how kids learn. They have a goal, to reach some toy that is out of reach. They have the intention of getting the toy. So now they try to rearrange themselves, to alter themselves in some way in order to reach it. So start with an infant. It reaches out its hand. That's already self-rearrangement. But it can't reach. Over time, one of the efforts at reaching becomes the turnover method. It's rolling in the correct direction to get closer. Again, self-rearrangement. Then they start to crawl. Even better. then they walk, run, and so on. Now let's fast forward to a child that can communicate. When the child does something wrong, the toy is taken away. Now the child tries to reach for it, no good. Then they try to walk over and take it, no good again. And then what do? They throw a tantrum, kicking, screaming, crying, etc. Now here, as a parent, you get to decide what it is that your child is going to learn. You know their goal, you know their intention, but which method will you allow to work? If you give in to the tantrum, your child just learned that when deprived of anything that they desire, the right self-rearrangement is tantrum mode. If you hold out, then the child learns that tantrums don't work. The rearrangement did not meet the goal. And then the child learns about things like timeouts and punishment and acceptable ways to interact with others and so on. What the child is doing is learning how to rearrange themselves in order to meet a goal that they have. And quite frankly, you do the same thing. To learn, you have to be able to solve complex problems, to store ideas and retrieve them from memory, and to develop and use computations in your problem-solving efforts. Tegmark argues that all these are, at least theoretically, already available to AI. The move from AI as it is to AGI is merely the level of complexity and scope that the AI is working with. And it's a pretty solid argument. AI is already here. Computers with ability to perform complex tasks. The ability is often dependent on the ability to parse through insane quantities of data in a way that a human being cannot hope to match, and then to digest that data in some relevant sense. The computing is easy, the learning is the scary part. However, does that mean that we're headed towards AI consciousness? Well, the answer here really depends on your understanding of the two previous lectures. If you assume that everything is matter, and that determinism is at play, then you and your consciousness and self are just the material brain. And so yes, you can have an AGI as conscious as any human being. But if you assume that there is some immaterial part of you, that you have free will, that means that you have a self and mind that are not material. And then, no, you cannot have a conscious AGI because no amount of matter will equal a self. Now, in both cases, by the way, you can have some version of AGI. The difference is in whether it is the kind of thing that can actually be self-driven, self-directed, or will it be a big computer that only does what some external force tells it to. Now, also note that on the materialistic reading, you are nothing more than a big computer that only does what some external force tells it to. The big difference here is in the idea of purpose, not of computation. And here we mean purpose not like a squirrel, a single pre-programmed kind of purpose, but a free direction of effort. If I give an AI all the images in the world, what will it do when it's done? Will it paint? Will it launch nukes? Will it sit there and do nothing until directed by an external force? Even very general goals like learn or help humanity still seem to need that external input. And that's a key feature of things that are solely matter. They only react to external forces. They don't have an internal self-drive. But again, we, and our sense of free will, may be nothing more than a mere genetic expression with a complex enough substrate. But in that case, we're back in determinism. A former student of mine had a rather interesting idea. What if what we call consciousness is really just the result of a very complex substrate, the brain, where the various features and fields the substrate produces are such that they produce a sense of self? And that's a great question. There are actually observable effects which are entirely unlike the substrates that produce them. Electromagnetic fields are one such effect, and the fields are in no way like the coils that make them. But we run into the same problem here. Can I mess with the behavior of the effect by messing with the physical properties of the substrate? That is, can I change the electromagnetic fields by messing with the coils? As long as the answer here is yes, then you're stuck in a pure matter mode of determinism. Your brain, which would be the super complicated substrate, is matter, just like the coil. And so it is just as determined as those billiard balls. And so any effects it produces, even though they are not material in the same way that the brain is material, are determined entirely because the thing that produces them is determined entirely. Again, this is not to say that the AI development will not continue and get insanely good and so on. Just that if we take the idea of AI in terms of Tegmark's AGI, meaning conscious AI, then the implication is that both that system and we are just matter, and then we're forced into determinism. This means that everything is simply playing out according to a script written for the universe from the moment of the Big Bang. Nothing can possibly be different, and nothing could change. Hence, since there are no choices, and no one can make a choice, there is no morality, no ethics, no good, no bad, no you or humanity in the way that we've always understood. Now, as an ethicist, this does not seem like an optimal outcome for me, but either way you think about the issue is up to you. The only real consideration here is that you must be consistent in your ideas, or else they become nothing but noise. Finally, there are a lot of great sci-fi ideas on AGI available out there, shows like Westworld or movies like Her. Personally, I think that the Ghost in the Shell films and series are some of the most in-depth explorations of meaning of AI and the question of conscious AI. As always, if you have questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below or shoot me an email.